Okay, today we're continuing our Journey Home series, talk about the Holy Breath. And it's a subject that is, I've talked about it before in some ways, but I'd like to go a little bit more in depth about this whole idea. And we're going to look at some of the names of God that are used mainly in the Old Testament. I was looking for a list of names, and there are at least 15. God has given 15 names. And they are often associated with what is happening around, in the particular story, around the whatever it is going on, because the ancient Hebrew would name places, people, things after things they associated with the activities. Diane asked if I would talk about metaphysical interpretation of the Bible, of some certain stories of the Bible, and what that is you look at the name of a person, you look at the name of a place, and look up the meaning of that word, that name, because people were named in different ways than we're named today. You know, today we kind of open the baby book and try to pick one that we like. But back then they would name people according to what happened around them. Their names would have actual meanings, and that's true with the names of God. So there are at least 15, and probably more than that. And the two that I want to talk about today are the most significant, because a lot of the sub-names, I guess you'd call them, are derivations of these two. And the two main names are Yahweh and Elohim, the Hebrew words. And the word Yahweh, when you read the word Lord or Lord God or Jehovah, the Hebrew word is Yahweh. When you read the word God, just God, the Hebrew word is Elohim. And if you want to see a difference in those, if you don't believe me, just open your Bible to page 1, first chapter of Genesis, and you'll see that the writer in the first chapter uses the name God, and that underlying Hebrew name is Elohim. When you get to chapter 2, verse 4, we shift into a new creation story, a different creation story. And you'll notice that it's Lord God. And you'll see Jehovah throughout, and you'll see the Lord. That's Yahweh. And what's interesting about this, one of the interesting things, is the first chapter of Genesis, the writer that used the name for God is Elohim. He wrote around 586 BC. And the one that used the word Yahweh wrote about 950 BC. So the second chapter is actually much older than the first chapter. And what has happened is an editor, or we call them redactors, a group of people probably got together and put these creation stories together. And what I would challenge you to do, it's kind of a fun thing to do, is go through chapter 1 of Genesis. Each day, write down just a couple of notes of what happened that day, what was created. Go to day 2, do the same thing. Just go on down through the whole thing. And then go to chapter 2, beginning with verse 4, and do the same thing. Start with day 1, write down what happened, day 2, and so on. And you'll find you have a very different story, very different stories. Two very different creation stories. And those aren't the only two that are in there. There are others that are kind of fragmented, stuck in different places and references and so on. But the first 5 books of the Bible have been attributed traditionally to Moses. Moses wrote these, but that is not true. What modern scholars have recognized is there are 4 authors there are 4 different writers, or 4 different schools, or 4 different groups. It's not necessarily an individual, but they've designated these 4 as J, the letter J, E, P, and D. So the J is Yahweh. The group or person that used the word Yahweh for God is the J writer. The E writer is the one that uses Elohim. The D writer is the Deuteronomic tradition, which is one of the most boring aspects of the Old Testament, if you want to read Deuteronomy or Numbers. And the P writer is a priestly writer. He shares all the priestly laws and codes and so forth, and you don't need to know all this stuff, really. It's just it's an interesting fact, and it's a fundamental in biblical scholarship. We learned this on day 1 when we were when I was in seminary. But it's helpful to know just in those first 2 chapters that you've got about 400 years spread, and the first one that you would think would be the beginning, is because it says, in the beginning God. You would assume it means the beginning. But it's not the beginning of when the Bible was written. It's that writer saying, here's how things happened. It's their Big Bang Theory. And the second chapter, same thing, only about 400 years earlier, or 4 or so, I don't know, 950 BC. But the names all have a meaning, and when we are looking at the name of God, it's very important to understand this, especially the name Yahweh, because that's the one used the most. And according to Hebrew scholars, the term Yahweh, and they spell it now Yahweh, was originally written without vowels, Yhwh. So the holy name of God could not be spoken. That was the whole idea. This is what has been passed down. Now, when you get into biblical scholarship, you'll find many opinions, and there's kind of a consensus that runs, and what I'm telling you right now is sort of that consensus. But there will always be someone that stands up and disagrees with it, so just bear that in mind. That's true in the scientific community as well. But it is, the name was not to be pronounced. And you've heard the commandment, don't take the name of the Lord in vain. This was a way to help do that. If you can't pronounce it, you can't take it in vain. But then I was listening to a Catholic priest this week, Friar Richard Rohr, R-O-H-R, I think it is. And I would recommend that you look him up. I don't agree with everything he says, but what he is a Catholic priest who has maintained the mystical tradition of the Catholic Church. And he's connected with centering prayer, Father Keating. There's a whole group of these people in the Catholic Church that actually uphold what I think is the mystical thread, the teachings of Jesus. And to me, it was a breath of fresh air to listen to this guy. I listened to several of his talks. He's all over the internet. He's travels all over the place. I think he has a center in New Mexico. And if he's ever in town, we might have him here. I mean, I would not hesitate at all to have him speak here in this pulpit. But it's what he was, one of his stories, he was saying that a Jewish physicist and also a Hebrew scholar said that the word Yahweh was originally indicated as a spelling for the sound of the breath, with the YH being the inhalation and the WH being the exhalation. And he actually demonstrated, he breathed into the microphone, inhaled, exhaled, and it sounded like Yahweh. And I think, you kind of improvise a little bit when you're doing little exercises like this just to get some oohs and ahs from your audience. But that makes perfect sense to me because of the connection that is made to God and the breath, to God and the wind, the breeze, the breath of the Almighty. I'll go over several references here to that whole idea. But this Reverend Richard, I'll call him, Friar Richard, is very mystically oriented, and that God, he says, is not out there, as I say, and that, you know, anybody that is of the mystical tradition says that it is as close, God is as close as breathing. And this is not a new idea, probably because it goes back to the word Yahweh. It probably goes back further than that. And of course, you know, the Eastern tradition, the Om is very important. That sound is very important. If you listen to a bunch of Hindu monks, or Buddhist monks doing chants, Om, it's pretty uplifting. There's something to sound. There's something to this. The first Hebrew writer wrote the creation story, said, in the beginning God, and all that. And God said, and that's how creation, it was spoken. That's how creation came about. So these things, you know, we take them in stride, but when you think about your own breathing, who's doing that? What is doing that? Where's that coming from? We do it without even thinking. It's part of our very essence. It is the physical side. What is behind the physical side of that? This breath of God. And I think that that is a very appropriate metaphor, because if you think about wind, you think about breath. You can't see it, at least in the summertime, but you can see the effect of it. And Jesus talked about the wind, how it blows, and you see the effect of it, but you don't know where it comes from or where it goes and all of that. And he's saying that's spirit. And the Greek word for spirit is pneuma, P-N-U-M-A. And I've pointed out before, you talk about a pneumatic gun. It's an air gun. It uses air. You can't see that force, but it is a force because it'll drive a nail. So it's a very appropriate way to think of God. It's invisible, but it's real. And you can see the effects of it. Somebody might say, if there's a God, why can't we see it? Well, you don't see the energy, but you see the effect of it. You don't see the wind, but you see the effect of it. Have you ever been driving through the desert and you see this big dust devil? I was going home one day from here, and I thought they built something out in the northern desert. I thought they built a tower out there. I don't know why I thought that, because the thing, it was a dust devil, but it was a perfect tube, you know, that went straight up. It's just incredible. I've never seen one that clear. And I've seen them, I've been hit by them on my motorcycle when we used to ride motorcycles. And it can be a pretty interesting moment when that happens. What happens is it hits the highway and loses its dust, so you can't see it. And you hit it when you're on your bike and you don't know which direction you're going for sure. It's kind of a surprise. But there's definitely power there. And of course, I'm from the Midwest, right from Tornado Alley, and wind is a pretty big deal there. You can usually see it because it's full of dust, it's full of dirt, and that's a tornado. It's a pretty sobering sight to see those things. But it's a very appropriate and very powerful, very powerful. So when we think of God as the breath or the wind, and you think of your breath, You think that's how close God is. And it helps you to think of God in a more personal way. My very breath, that which is causing me to breathe. You don't pray for that to start happening, it's happening now. It's involved in us at this very moment. And I just find that very, there's a stimulating aspect to that, to thinking of that's my living presence, it's my essence. I'm not talking about something that's far off from me. I'm talking about something that is very involved in me. That I am the breath of God. It's kind of an interesting way to think about it. So Job had a couple of interesting things to say also about this. He says, "Let days speak and many years teach wisdom, but it is the spirit in a man, the breath of the Almighty, that makes him understand." So he's saying you can have years of experience, years of training, years of teaching, but it's the breath of the Almighty. And that breath is inspiration. It's present. It's just ways of bringing this closer to home, closer to our thinking. That it's something that's happening now. It's going on now. Again, he says, "The Spirit of God has made me, and the breath of the Almighty gives me life." So it's happening now. It's that breath of God is my life. It is my essence. And this is totally in keeping with the mystical tradition. There was never any concept of separation. The only idea of separation that there is, and it goes back to this, the Hebrew tried to explain it in the Garden of Eden story. When Adam and Eve, eat the fruit of the tree of, and it's not an apple. There's no place where it says apple, so get that out of your vocabulary. It's the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Duality. The moment you embrace duality, me and God, you fall from the garden. You fall out of that place of oneness with God. Has nothing to do with actual eating or apples or fruit of any kind. And it's very clear in the Bible when you read it. It's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's when you start believing there are two powers rather than one, you fall from that state of awareness of your oneness with God. That's what the story is trying to say. And what it's also trying to say is, why is life so difficult? People ask that question all the time. They were asking it back then, probably more so because they were living a pretty harsh life. Many people, probably the majority of people, lived in the peasant class. They didn't have a lot, and it was all about survival. Why is life hard? Because our ancestors disobeyed God. That was the answer. That's how you answer that question. Why is life so hard? And here's how it all started. And in the world of Christianity, we've taken that to a whole different level, to this whole original sin. It has nothing to do with how you're thinking now. It has to do with the fact that Adam and Eve were thrown out of the garden and you're paying the price for it. You're out of it as well. But there's a way back in. And that's the plan of salvation that we hear about. So the mystical tradition does not hold that, does not even go there in any way whatsoever. The reason we fall from the garden is because we believe suddenly in two powers. we say, I've got this problem and I don't have the power to resolve it, so I'm going to worry. I'm going to fear. We are declaring there are two powers. There's me and there's that. And actually we're declaring there's three. There's me and there's that and there's God. And maybe God will help me out. So we're actually subdividing the whole thing. And we have fallen from that state of awareness, that Garden of Eden. Because in that garden, it's shown that everything's taken care of. It's all perfect. It's that chick developing inside the shell. Everything it needs is there. It's provided. And then it cracks out and enters a world where it has to fend for itself. And that's kind of the metaphor that is fitting for us. But we have this problem, and we have two powers going on. There's me and there's that. And then I call on God as a third power, as a third party, to come in and help. So the mystic never sees it that way. If you are having a problem here and you're reacting to it, the mystic would say, why are you using that energy to respond in that way, when you could use it to affirm that the power you need, the intelligence you need, is here. It's in your very breath. And it's now manifesting through you. That to me is the benefit of bringing Yahweh, or this whole notion of God, into as something as close as your breath. Because we tend to shoot it up in the sky. We tend to make ourselves separate. We have fallen out of the Garden of Eden, so to speak, mentally. So that's what it is, and we want to bring our awareness back to that point where we realize we are the focal point of God. We are the breath of the Almighty. And if you're going through a struggle of some kind, you can actually sit down and pay attention to your breathing. And an exercise I read about a long time ago and have done is to use your breathing to say, I am. Your inhalation is I, and exhalation is am, the expression. I am. That's Yahweh. That's the Lord God. That's Jehovah. You're bringing that awareness into your situation. When you sit down and relax in that consciousness, you are reconnecting consciously with your power, with your source, your I am. And that's another name for God. What did God say to Moses when he said, who shall I say sent me? The response was, I am, that I am. Tell them I am sent you. And that doesn't make a lot of sense in our English language. It makes total sense in their spiritual language. That's the name of God. I am. It's a statement of now, of being, not becoming, but being. When we have a problem, we are not being. We are praying that we can become something more than we are now. I don't have power now, and I want power, so I must become more powerful to overcome this problem. But to say I am is a statement of completeness. I'm not asking for more power. I have more power. I will speak it into expression. And really that's what prayer is. That's alignment with the one presence and one power, the one source. It's a very powerful way to think of God. And if you're going through something at this moment, you know how we all have a tendency to think, I'm praying for this and looking for the thing to unfold. And we're sort of trained to think that way. And most of us do, and we have to kind of catch ourselves and not do that. Because what we want to do is bring our full power to this now moment. Bring the breath of the Almighty into play. Bring our I am complete at this moment. That bring that consciousness into play. Because if I am complete in this moment, how could I possibly fear? If I don't need anything added to me to feel whole, what is there to fear? And we start looking at, why am I responding this way? What am I doing? What's this pushback in my consciousness? I'm afraid something in me is going to get hurt. So I shift that thinking that nothing in me can get hurt. I am an expression of God. And God is the very breath of my being. Not something far off, but already present. And we start thinking that way, and we bring our focus into this now moment. And that moment, this moment, is our center of power. And once we touch that, we know everything's okay. You don't have to know what the next step is you're going to take. And that's the problem we have. We sit here and if I'm going to be peaceful, I need to know what's going to happen here. I need to know what's going to happen next. Every one of us does that. We all do it. So our peace is conditional. It's conditional upon our knowing how things are going to work out. But we can shift that just a little bit by saying, I don't know how things are going to work out, I just know they are. And I know they're working out now. That's a pretty major step. Because it takes the burden off your shoulders. You don't have to figure it out. And I think that's what a lot of prayer is. We close our eyes and try to figure everything, work out the plan. We make a menu. Okay, God, here's exactly what I need. Get busy. It's not a letting go so much, or an awareness. It's a trying to figure things out. We're praying with the head. It's an intellectual exercise. And it sure is, there's times where that's good and that's necessary. I'm not saying stop thinking, because it all works through our thinking. But when you start thinking about prayer and how you utilize it, if you utilize it, how you do it, are you praying from inside the garden or are you praying from outside the garden? That's really how you can think of it. Have you been kicked out and you're asking for help because you're powerless now? Or are you aware that you are in that garden, you have all the power you need? Everything you need is taken care of. Doesn't mean it's all finished out here. Doesn't mean there aren't steps to take. But it's a knowing. It's a knowing that things are working out for the highest good of all. Humankind has struggled with the notion of God as the creative life force that permeates all things, and that in whom we live and move and have our being, as Paul stated. It's easier to simply personify the spiritual abstraction, making God into something that resembles an ancient ancestor. We've been taught to think that way, and so we fall back on that quite often. I need a powerful old man to come to my rescue. That's how we tend to think of it. And it makes sense on the intellectual level. There's power in might and strength. You know, we see it all around us. You touch that place in yourself, that center of power, nothing can shake you from that. When you truly touch it, when you truly know that everything is okay, that the greater good that you desire is now unfolding, whether it looks like your expectation or not. When you reach a point where you know that's true, nothing can move you. Nothing can disturb the calm peace of your soul, as they say, from that point of view. And that's where we want to reach. But it's so easy to fall back. I don't know what to do, so I call on the old man. Psalms, I'll conclude with this beautiful statement that God is our refuge and strength. And again, think of this as close as your breath kind of thing. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. We've all had problems, but I doubt they've been that big. And so the psalmist is saying there is a point of power in you, your refuge, your strength, here now, waiting. And that's the very breath of God. All right? I love that idea, and I hope it has meant something to you today. So next week we'll do it again. Thanks for coming out, and have a safe week.
3, 4. Painting a picture, blue skies and puffy clouds. Couple little kittens, my old dog running around. There's a bunch of yellow wildflowers, some humming honeybees. And a safe little place for you and me. Take it a day, find the time to breathe. Open the cage, let my mind fly free. I'm sitting by this stream with a sweet melody, watching ripples and feeling the breeze. I'm writing a song about a mountain strong and tall, with shoulders to lean on if I ever think I'll fall. There's a fast running river there to wash my cares away, in a shady little hollow we can play. Taking the day to let the past just be. Open the cage, let my mind fly free. I'm sitting by this street with a sweet melody, watching the ripples and feeling the breeze. Well, I've run and I've struggled way too long, trying to find a place where I belong, until I realized right here and now, if I open my eyes, I'm sitting on sacred ground. Take a day, find the time to breathe. Open the cage, let my mind fly free. I'm sitting by this stream with a sweet melody, watching the ripples and feeling the breeze. Watching the ripples.
You've been watching a talk given by Reverend Doug Bottorff here at Independent Unity in beautiful Grand Junction, Colorado. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us spread our message. If you would like to support us, you can do so by clicking the button in the right-hand corner of the video screen. We greatly appreciate your support. Thanks again for watching.